Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would ask to be made part of our record an excellent article in today's U.S. Today, Cutting SSI Would Only Hurt Children, written by Dr. Susan Parrish of Brandeis University and Dr. James Perrin, a professor of pediatrics at Harvard Medical School. And just reading a couple of lines from that report, I think we've had testimony in my opening statement to this effect, but SSI serves only low-income children with the most severe mental and physical impairments. Its medical and financial eligibility requirements are so strict that only 1.6% of the children in the United States and fewer than 10% of kids with disabilities receive SSI. In fact, the overwhelming majority of children who apply for SSI are denied. Congress should look for ways to support our nation's most vulnerable children and families instead of painting a target on their backs in the name of deficit reduction. That certainly summarizes my own feeling about this. I'm against scams. I think everybody on this committee is against scams. I'm against them whether they're committed by giant pharmaceutical companies at the cost of tens of millions of dollars to our public service programs, or they're committed by one young woman who goes off to have drugs with her boyfriend. And it seems to me that the focus ought to be on getting at the scams rather than on denying benefits to many deserving families. We have one way of getting at scams under the system, and that is the disability reviews. Unfortunately, under the Bush administration, the resources for those disability reviews were significantly reduced. And finally, under the current administration, we've begun to increase the review process. That's where the focus ought to be rather than across-the-board cuts. I find the testimony Dr. Burkhauser has left, the suggestion that because the states have done such a great job reducing benefits in temporary assistance for needy families, in cutting the level of those benefits and affording them to fewer and fewer families, let's let them do the same thing for families with children with severe physical or mental disabilities. It's a little like the argument that some people have made that because the states do so little with Medicaid in our nursing homes, let's let them administer Medicare too and save some money at the expense of seniors and individuals with disabilities. I think that's very backward thinking. I know what will happen in Elgin, Texas to this beautiful set of twins who suffer from autism. They'll get the same kind of second-rate support from the state of Texas that the state of Texas provides through the Medicaid program for those who rely on it, who can barely get by, who can't get all the prescriptions that their doctors provide to them. Mr. Stein, what would be the effect, as you see it, in states across the country for these families if we just turn all this, we use, I believe, the term devolution, let's just give it all back to the states instead of maintaining any federal program with reference to SSI?
Well, I think there would be terrible consequences, Mr. Doggett. There would be a lack of equity. There would be a lack of minimum standards. There would be the very subjectivity that perhaps Mr. Burkhauser is concerned about. When you have a national system like the Social Security run Social Security system for kids and adults, you have national standards, you have quality controls in place. In fact, the quality control accuracy rate for decision making in child disability cases is something like 97%. Now, there is a kind of myth out there that this is the new welfare. And that's almost a defamation of the SSI Kids program. And the assumption that suddenly when you reduce Latanophrols, all those kids go on to SSI. And that, I think you've heard a little theme of that, about that by a couple of people at this table. But despite those allegations that SSI is or has become a general welfare program, the truth is that being poor is not enough to qualify for SSI. To get SSI, you also have to have a very severe disability. And the Congress in 1996, in the welfare legislation then, upped the severity standard greatly.
Well, let me just ask you one other question that's been referred to in testimony, I think by Dr. Roberts and by others here. Looking at the testimony that is on file with the committee today from Dr. James Scully on behalf of the American Psychiatric Association. That testimony indicates in response to this issue of, well, aren't the people out there just passing out drugs to these kids so they can qualify for this program? He says that the medication treatment for disorders like ADHD actually reduces the likelihood of eligibility for SSI. Is that correct?
That's exactly true.